Welcome everybody to the City of Monroe work session, April 3rd, 2018. It's now 6 o'clock. Calling the meeting to order and looking at our quorum. Everybody's here except Mr. Garrett. He is on his way, stuck in traffic. We'll go ahead and move into department reports. City Administrator, Logan Probst.
Sure, just a couple quick things here. I've been in discussions with Walton County regarding the potential closure of Coker Park. As you know, it's not in great shape. It's pretty derelict. So I'm thinking about maybe just closing it off for safety concerns, and then later on we'll start master planning that site for a better park for the city. So the county really doesn't have any use for it right now, so we're going to try to coordinate that mothballing of the park.
Logan, if you closed it, do we tear down any buildings?
Yeah, potentially we could tear down a couple of buildings that have become havens for malfeasance, I think you could say.
That's what I'm thinking. If
Yeah.
Closing it probably is not going to do any good if we leave the building.
That's right. So there'll be a plan in place for appropriately closing that park and doing something much better with it later on down the road. Quick update on cybersecurity without getting into too many of our details here. We are taking notes as to what has happened in other cities. I think we're well positioned overall compared to a lot of our counterparts, but we can always do more. So we're instituting a whole host of measures to beef up that security even more. But that is on the forefront of what a lot of our departments are working on right now, is cybersecurity. That's all I have, Mayor.
Well, please pass to Steve Connell. We appreciate how hard he's been going at it with cybersecurity.
He's doing a great job.
Are there any questions, any discussion? About the parks, do we have any other park news? Anything?
I can hit that in the next Central Services update that I'll do for Mr. Bailey.
Sounds great. Let's move to Central
let's
Services.
move on into
Logan
that.
Probst.
First in your packet, you see facilities management. Quick update there. We've got a new City Hall sign that matches the one out front on the Highland. This one's out here on Broad. We've talked about it for a while and it's finally installed. I think it looks pretty great. We've been working on some more roofing issues at the water treatment facility, and also next month you'll probably see something for the fire department. Our contractor has got the bids back for that, but we just couldn't get it on the agenda in time. We're also working on City Hall drive-through. Hopefully revamp that. We're down to one drive-through working right now, and make a little bit more secure work area for our employees at the same time. The library is currently undergoing some repairs to make it look better. The inside's already been done pretty nicely, so it's up to us to help make the exterior look a lot better. Childers Park, we're removing a lot of dead trees now, and then we'll be replacing those with some city tree board approved trees as we take out some of those more dangerous trees. A lot of those are in the dog park itself, so we're going to be opening the fence and then taking out some of those large trees and limbs.
What about the watering station for the dogs?
It is out there now.
It is.
Yes.
It's complete.
It is complete. Good. It was activated thanks to Rodney's crew right before the little event last weekend.
Okay.
So that was a nice thing to have.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Safety program, we're continuing with that. We're making a lot of progress as we do the field work and the audits on the safety. And then trash pickup. So, of course, streets and transportation, their right-of-way crews picking up a lot of trash. Mr. Croy will hit on that later. But also on the Central Services side, the grounds crew, in between mowings and everything, we've been deploying those workers out up the high impact corridors, Broad Street, Spring Street, pick up a lot of trash. I mean, it's just, the volume is unbelievable. We just need more help from the public to keep it from being there in the first place. And I know Danny's working hard to keep the trucks are covered out there. So they're beefing that up to make sure that we don't have anything flying off the trucks. So the city's doing everything it can possibly do to prevent, the city looking bad with all this trash and rubbish on the roadways. And then landscaping services, I hope you have been a little more satisfied lately with how that's looking. With the grass growing in the cemeteries now, we'll be ramping up how many cuts we do so it doesn't get in the condition it was in, last summer. That's all we have for central services.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? I will say that I talked to Chris Couch with the county and talked with our team that the roadway pickup for trash, we have done, Chris had done 52 tons last year, and we also picked up another 52 tons. That's a lot of waste of empty cans and plastic bags and trash. That's not all tires and bottles. So there are times that I've become a bit of an environmentalist in the plastic bags and the route that California has taken by banning those being sold from their stores. Might be a step we want to consider down the road. Keep your eyes open for those plastic bags that are all over the place, because you can see them in the streams at the parks, and you can see them on the sides of the roads. And I hope you'll all keep that in mind over the next few months, and that'll come back up. Moving into code department, Mr. Kelly, Patrick Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just some highlights from the report you have there in front of you. For the month of February, we had 36 code inspections. We had 25 permits written in that month. New business licenses were issued for 13 businesses, and 8 had closed. Some of the closures, again, as usual, are just ownership changes or name changes, so they're not necessarily businesses that are gone. Continued receiving payments for business licenses. In February, we had 295 business licenses get paid for at that time. Continue inspecting nuisance properties, processing those projects. There's a report attached to this report that should be on your items there that shows the number we've had demolished so far this year is 8. We've got 3 more structures that have demolition permits purchased for them that just haven't been completed yet. But that'll bring us up to 10 or 11. I think the 8th one may be actually pending starting tomorrow. Anyhow, we'll be to 10 or 11 by the time the demolition permits that we have outstanding right now get completed. The city marshal removed 43 signs from the roadway. We wrote 112 repair cleanup orders. Investigated 4 tampering and theft cases, wrote 6 citations. And moving on to historic preservation, they granted 4 certificates of appropriateness for the items listed there. And the Planning Commission granted 1 certificate of appropriateness and heard 3 rezone requests and 1 text amendment, which you have all subsequently seen. And if you've got any questions on the balance of the report, I'll be happy to answer them. Or anything else code related.
Any questions? Any comments from Mr. Kelly? I appreciate your getting after it, Patrick.
Thanks, sir.
I know there are times that becomes not so easy, so I appreciate it. Economic Development, Sadie Krosek, please.
Thank you. You'll see in the Economic Development Report, the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing, the GIC program, that we're in our final year of participation. Officially is our notes from our last retreat, which were in Pine Mountain, Georgia in February, are attached. You can see the list of the volunteer team members that attended, as well as our city staff that were there. And then these are the areas that kind of fill out our work plan and our goals. This is what the team is processing based on the sessions that GIC facilitates, the experts they bring in, and then what our volunteer team sees as needs in our community. So please read through that. If you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know. I'll be happy to clarify that or pass it along to the team. Also, just going back to the report, the Places to Play crowdfunding campaign is now complete. It's finished. It wasn't when I did the report. And it raised $8,750 online, but we also had an in-kind donation of labor of $7,000. So we're $15,000 plus from the community to help with these elements in the parks and alleyways. So that's very exciting. The car show and Easter egg hunt were last weekend, very successful, especially for a rain out for the car show. It was a good turnout. And we have an alleyway work day for Washington Street Court Alley planned with volunteer team on April 14th. Our new alcohol ordinance, we're working on communication pieces for downtown, flyers, posters, letters to restaurants. They can be fully aware of how all the things that are now allowed in our business-friendly alcohol ordinances. And then the Piedmont ribbon cutting was yesterday. I was out of town, but I hope some of you were able to attend for the hospital. And then I have a list of our ongoing projects there. I just want to point out upcoming events. We're about to get into our crazy event season when it comes to downtown. We have Food Truck Friday on the 13th, Citywide Cleanup Day on the 21st. Also have attached here our draft of direct mailer that we would be sending out. One change that's not on here that we're going to add is that Danny was able to coordinate with tailors. We're going to be able to do junk car pickup. So we're very excited about that. We're going to add that to this mail out so that all residents will know about the volunteer cleanup day, as well as that they can take any trash that they have on their own, if they live within the city limits, to the transfer station, and they can coordinate junk car pickup. There is a charge, it'll be $20. Public Works is going to help coordinate that, but that's great for our community. Hopefully we'll have people take advantage of that. And Farm to Table, April 28th, and then we start concerts and farmers market in May. Any questions? Be happy to answer them.
That's exciting. Any questions? Any comments? Always like that report, Sadie. Thank you. Brian Thompson, Electric and Telecom, please, sir.
Thank you. I'll give you a few updates. The Spring Street project is moving well ahead of schedule. All of our light fixtures and everything but the poles are in. We're working very well with the contractor, if at the same level as the South Broad T, if not better. So I'm very, very happy with their communication skills. Wayne Street project, we are down to the final few changeovers. We are being really delayed by working around the businesses' schedules, trying to keep them on during their normal hours, trying to work late at night, early in the morning to make these last few changeovers. And then that should be done. Pollock subdivision had a few issues last week with the contractor. Those are resolved as of now, and the contractor should be out of there in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Once he is gone, we will start transferring our telecommunication services in the neighborhood, push and prod and throw rocks at Windstream till they get either transferred, or we will transfer them and send them a bill that I expect would probably never be paid, but we would still transfer them. And then pull the old poles and start cleanup of the assorted dirt piles around the poles, that kind of thing, and get that done. The fiber to the premise project, our blower is in. We're doing our training for our fiber blower next week, so we can start deploying this. We've been testing the unit on a couple of customers over the past month or two. It does as advertised. We're very happy with the product. Now that the blower's in and we'll get done with that training, we can start deploying the product throughout downtown. It will start, the first deployments will be from the water tank to this office, because we've got to blow the fiber into this office to do the final connections. And so we'll just pick up those businesses along the way. And then we'll just make the turn and go up Washington and start circling downtown. Electric system automation, we have, I have met with several switch manufacturers. We've got to figure out, we're still in the planning stages of what electronics we're going to use to control the switches themselves. I am leaning toward the same electronics we use in the substation, just to make it a very familiar transition for our crews from substation to switchgear in the field. It just makes the most safety sense. And then we will, I'll be bringing to you, hopefully next month, the test equipment that we talked about in the CIP for underground fault finding and meter testing. We spent about 7 hours in Southside the other night trying to find an underground fault that we knew we needed this product. The problem came a little earlier than we were prepared to buy the stuff. And the bigger issue was those customers were without power for 7 hours, where we could have been a much faster restoration. So we moved that up in the process, and we should be bringing that to you next month. And I'll take any questions.
You have any questions? Regarding the fiber to premise, once that gets started and we move around, how long until we get finished with our initial phase?
I would say third quarter of this year to get the whole downtown. You got to think this box itself, or this initial launch, is capable of doing 504 customers.
Right.
Now, we are prepared to do, with the initial purchase, about 200, 220, I don't know the exact, it's right around 200, but it's just buying a card, sliding in a card. So we'll have a business plan, or we do have a business plan, based on the pricing that y'all have given us, that we can just leapfrog from there to there to there. Now, the big thing, the big excitement of now that we can initially get started and start true construction is we have money in this year's budget, and so we are identifying the next area to attack.
Right.
And that will probably be one of our biggest cable TV nodes. It has the most density of internet users, that has a lot of overhead power lines and communication lines. A lot easier to deploy. So we're starting to ID that now. We're pulling what we call MIBs, or information, off of our CMTS, which will give us the highest traffic area in town. We'll attack that next.
Great, thank you. Any
All
other
right,
questions?
thank you.
Move along to Ms. Thompson, Beth Thompson, Finance.
Thank you. I won't go over the financial report y'all have in front of you in too much detail. Obviously, this is for February's numbers, so we're still pretty much where we should be for this time of year. Y'all can look over that. If you have any questions, please let me know about that. Malden Jenkins, our auditors, have finished up their field work and given us their preliminary numbers. So we're starting in the finance department to work on the MD&A and transmittal letter and that will have to go along with the CAFR. So we're knee deep in that in the finance department. Also, you'll see with the financial report the tax revenue comparisons. This is something that was asked of me initially. So now that we have some preliminary numbers for 2017, I wanted to go through this and kind of show y'all the comparison from this year to last year. The tax revenues that the city of Monroe collects, as you see on that first page, are the property tax, motor vehicle tax, title ad valorem tax, mobile home tax, personal property tax, the local option sales tax, real estate transfer tax, franchise tax, the hotel motel tax, alcohol beverage, which is beer and wine, and also mixed drink tax, the business and occupation tax, insurance premium tax, and the financial institution tax. There's detailed descriptions of each of those. If you have any questions, just please stop me at any point. In comparison from 2016 to 2017, overall our collections in taxes increased, which is also always a good thing. Of our $2.9 million digest, we collected almost $2.8 million of that. So we were about 95% collections for 2017, which I think has played a big part of those collections is having Walton County collect those for us. And so that's really helped in the collection process for us in that. As you can see, our current year tax collections compared to 2016 increased $136,000. Title ad valorem tax also
Beth, I'm sorry.
increased.
Can we go back to the property taxes just for a moment? In 2017 taxes, we've collected, you said about 95%. That was through year end?
Yeah, that's on the preliminary numbers that we've gotten from our audit, which I don't think it'll change very much at all.
But my point, aren't we still collecting some of that today?
We are, but the way that when we collect in 2018, you'll see under that, it shows prior year, that'll fall into a prior year category. when you collect in a current year for a prior year tax.
But I guess my point is, this will finish up at higher than 95%.
I'm sorry.
Our total collections
Will
will be higher
go
than
up,
95% of the index, right?
yes. Yes, they'll continue to collect those, yes.
Okay. And how does that compare to what it was last year?
Well, in 2016, prior year collections were 50,000, and in 2017 were only 16,000. So,
But in percentage wise, how are we going to finish 17 compared to 16 as a percent of the digest?
well, currently the numbers that we have before us is around 95%. I haven't looked at what we've collected in 2018 thus far, because I did this just in comparison 16 to 17.
But I think for 16, if I remember correctly, we were around 96% through the end of that year.
So we're going to be similar numbers?
Very similar, yeah. You may have one larger taxpayer that defers theirs on into the next year and pays a penalty and interest on it. So it's collected in the subsequent year. But yeah, very similar collections. Before that, when we collected it ourselves, we were only around 82 to 85%.
Okay.
That's
That's where I was trying to come to, I guess, is the difference is made since we're allowing the county to combine bill.
We're getting more for our money.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, because 2016 was the first year that Walton County started collecting for us. Yes. Our lost local option sales tax also increased 110,000, so to say, which is a good indication of people that are shopping local. And going down the line, overall, like I said, the collections increased for 2017. If you look at the graph below that, 47% of our tax collections are property taxes, with right behind that is sales tax, which is 27%, which makes up the bulk of the tax collections that we collect here at the city. On the next page, if you'll see,
Can
I did a
come back and
comparison.
ask another? I'm sorry, I have
Okay.
to ask questions, okay?
Uh-huh.
On the, not the sales tax and not the property tax, but on occupational tax and insurance premium tax, those two in particular, I guess, and maybe even franchise tax. How do we know what we should collect, and how do we know if all the people that need to pay us are paying us?
That I'm not really sure of. I'm going to defer to Logan on that.
So on occupation tax, a lot of that goes through, obviously, the code office to verify against the businesses that are out there, right?
But
For
the
the business
businesses pay that based on a percent of gross revenue, right?
Or numbers of employees.
Well, it depends. There's two different ways to calculate it. But a lot of that's, you must trust what's turned in. And I think you see that with insurance premium tax in particular, because that's passed down through the state based on taxes collected off insurance policies. So that premium tax is passed along, comes back to us, and then we put it in the general fund to offset fire services, basically. And then what was the other one you asked? The franchise?
Franchise.
Again, that's kind of you trust it. We do engage with GMA to do some audits to help us with that, but you pretty much have to trust what is sent to you. I mean, we could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in independent audits, but I don't know that we would achieve the savings.
I just see the stuff coming out of GMA, and maybe we're already doing it, that's advertising that they can find lost money in effect.
Yeah, and we do engage GMA for some of those audit services.
All right, that's good.
Okay, and on
I'm
the
sorry.
last page is a comparison I did. Try to do it at Monroe, and then keep in mind this is 2016 numbers because this is what was readily available to us, because obviously not everyone's 2017 financials are available out on the internet. But I did a comparison to similar cities in the state of Georgia or close to us. Bainbridge, Covington, and Loganville are more in line to us population-wise. And then on the last column, you'll see a statewide average. overall, I think we're in pretty good shape as far as in comparison to cities who are in the same size as we are, or also on the statewide average. Especially if you look at the very first line, general property taxes, we're at $3 million, and with Bainbridge being very close to us in population, they're at $2 million, and in Loganville, they're at $3.8 million. Obviously, Covington has a lot more industrial area than we do, so theirs is a little bit more high, a little higher than what we have here at Monroe. Lost is also a lot higher than those that are in comparison with Bainbridge and Loganville, and also the statewide average were a lot higher, which is a good indication, like I said, of people shopping local and in the city of Monroe. Going on down, you'll see that the comparison with hotel motel, in comparison to Loganville, we are a little bit higher, but obviously with the others we're a lot lower. And then with the beer and wine, alcohol, we're very close to Loganville and higher than the statewide average. But overall, I think that, as you can see, this is a good indication of the taxes that we collect here in the city of Monroe compared to other cities that are similar to us and to the statewide average. That I think we're in pretty good shape. Anybody have any questions?
One.
Go ahead.
The real property taxes, with Loganville being a little higher than we are, there. Do you think that if we do things that we're talking about later on this agenda tonight, talking about blighted properties and stuff, we can build the property base up, we can change that number?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's another reason we need to have high quality housing.
Yeah, and then also with the hotel motel, we have the hotel that's coming to Monroe in the near future. That's going to obviously raise that, and then with the more property that we have and all the subdivisions that we have coming online, that'll help with the property tax increase as well.
Do you have any idea of what Loganville's millage rate is compared to ours?
I did not look that up.
It is a good bit higher than ours, if I remember.
I think it is higher, but I don't know what it is. I'd hate to even guess.
Well, the increase has got something to do with that, even though I know they've got probably a lot more tax base, but I was just curious.
Thank you for providing that comparison.
Thank you.
Any questions, any comments? I know we kept throwing you off topic. I didn't know if you could jump to something else. I knew I was at the end. Thank you,
All right,
Beth.
thank you.
Chief Glass, with fire department, if you would stay for police department report as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The fire department had a grand total of 213 calls for service. 139 of those calls were med assist type calls. You can see all those. They conducted 272 hours of training. This is not in February, but we've started developing our quick response vehicle. Started doing that deployment Monday at 7 a.m. And we'll be coming back with recommendations on the type vehicle we want to use for that, but right now we're using one of the pickup trucks. Out of those 139 calls, at least 127 of them or 125 of them we could have used a QRV versus using a pumper, which saves a lot of fuel, which saves a lot of wear and tear on a $500,000-$600,000 piece of equipment. So real proud that they got that in going, and we look forward to having that completely developed and talking to you probably next month about what type of vehicle we want to use, deploying that on a full-time basis. In the future too, on April the 20th at 9 o'clock at 125 North Wayne Street, we'll be doing a live fire training exercise and be taking a building down. Any of you that are, know Mr. Bradley will probably be there, but any of you, I'd invite any of you to come watch you guys train and see what they do, and we can make it a pretty safe environment and maybe suit you up if you so desire to go in and see what they do. But basically, that's where we're at on fire, pending your questions.
The date of that training, Brian?
That's gonna be 20 April, barring no thunderstorms and that kind of thing.
We'll be excited to see that. Any questions, any comments? You said out of the calls last month, we had 139 calls and 125 for quick response?
No, this is, I'm just looking at this is back in February, those numbers.
Right.
We deployed it starting Monday at 7, and just looking at the type calls we had in February, out of 139 EMS calls, we could have used that vehicle on at least 125 of them. That wasn't required to, right. And they've come up with a real good SOG, standard operation guide or standard operating procedure on how to deploy it where it doesn't affect fire capabilities. The odds of us having a fire in that, I looked at an agency that had something like 20,000 calls a year in a 24-month period. They'd had one event where they had a fire and a QRV thing deployed at the same time. So can it happen? Yeah, but the odds are not strong.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Move into the police department report, please.
Thank you. Police department answered 3,345 calls for service, had 539 cases in city court, conducted 73 training hours, had 67 Part 1 crimes, 47 Part 2 crimes, 97 adults arrested, and 6 juveniles. Pending your questions.
Any questions or comments? I appreciate it, Chief. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Solid waste. Danny Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Danny.
Report is for February. We collected and deposited over 937 tons of trash and garbage inside the city limits. A little less than 105 tons of recycling, including 173 scrap tires. We had 15 customers deposit 5,156 tons of trash inside the transfer station. Delivered 62 carts, 17 recycling bins, 6 dumpsters, and we issued 8 cemetery work permits. And the only other thing I have, we sent out a notice a couple weeks ago concerning our curbside recycling collection. We are now no longer able to accept glass and aerosol cans. The glass can be taken to Walton County, Keep Walton Beautiful, and they also have 6 drop sites you can take it to. On Leroy Anderson Road is where you can take it. But we did add some items. Cardboard, it has to be flattened, and so it can fit in the bin. If you need an additional bin, we'll give you one. Paper egg cartons, cereal boxes, and junk paper mail. We can take those items. I can take any questions that you might have.
Why can we no longer take glass?
Our MRF, where we take it to industries, they're not accepting it because it's causing some risk problems for employees, and it's jamming up conveyor belts, and the broken glass is causing some issues with the process. Now there is a market for the glass. We're doing everything in our power to keep from landfilling it, but there is a market for it. It's just a matter of source separating and get it to the processor.
Right. Because we do single stream.
The single stream, it get mixed in with the other items. It's caused a problem. Also, You mentioned plastic bags. The plastic bags, when you put your items in the bin, you should unwrap them. And the items should be loose because the plastic bags, the Walmart bags, is causing some issues in the processing also. Because they're called tanglers and they get tangled up in the conveyor belt. So when you set your items out, it's convenient, put all the aluminum cans in the bag and just drop them in the bins, but you should let them loose.
Danny, with people that want a larger bin because of the cardboard, to be able to get more in, do you have any plans for having like a rolling, like they do with the trash?
Yes, we do. What's slowing us down is the automated 95-gallon containers get dumped into the process. They're contaminated. The volume is good, but a lot of items are not being checked, and when it goes into the process of the MRF, it's being rejected. So we're real careful about making sure once we get to that point, we're definitely going to be doing a lot of education, making sure what you put in it. But that's the biggest problem, contamination on the curbside.
Okay. So you're thinking at some point in the future, though, you'll use a larger bin?
Definitely.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Danny. I appreciate it. Moving to streets and transportation. Chris Croy's here for Jeremiah still. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, y'all. Before you in our report, we have all the data for the different divisions. You're welcome to look at it. As Jeremiah mentioned last month, Georgia Safe Sidewalks was here doing their assessment of our sidewalks within the city. They're still working on that assessment. They're within the final stages of it. As you may notice downtown, a lot of the repairs that they were going to do for us have already been completed. I think somewhere in the number of 250 areas have been repaired so far. Hopefully, pretty soon we'll receive the last of that assessment, and once we have that information, we'll be able to move forward and coming up with a plan to repair some of the sidewalks throughout the rest of the city. Also, as Logan mentioned earlier, the litter on the roadways, our right-of-way crew, they were able to remove almost 2.5 tons of litter in February. It's about double what they were able to do in January. With the combined effort of them and our grounds crew, they were able to pick up close to almost 5 tons for the month of February. So it's a big effort between them two divisions working together. We were trying to get this big push between February and this month before we start our right-of-way mowing up. So we're real happy about that. Also, our street division was able to remove about 9 tons of debris from our ditches throughout the cities along the roadways. That included things from leaves, sticks, litter, things that get washed down in all of our ditches during the large rain events. So they were able to remove about 9 tons from there during February.
What is your typical month? What do you pick up in
litter?
No, in the yard waste, tree down in the ditches.
The actual vegetation of tree limbs and items like that is actually under Danny, under the solid waste department. So he would have those numbers for you. Okay. Now we pick up or collect the leaves for the city, and I was actually getting to that. We actually collected 130 tons of leaf in just the month of February alone.
Okay.
So as far as an average of limbs and vegetation debris, that's going to be, Danny might be able to provide you with that information.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Just we've noticed that there are a lot of areas in town that have had what seem to be years of fallen leaves, limbs, things that folks have pushed off to the side. It's kind of tough, private property versus public. I need to keep an eye on that.
All right. Also, recently, our sign division department, they installed 2 new school zone flashing stand signs that are solar powered over by Monroe Area High School. We got them up and running. You can drive by there and look at them. They look real nice. They used to be there. They got missing. And now we got 2 new ones in there. So hopefully that's going to make that area safer and make drivers more aware of the school zone. And up and coming, we're looking at starting our asphalt patching for our approved LMIG streets for this year. So in the next upcoming months, now that the weather's getting nice, hopefully we're going to start doing those patches, asphalt patches, getting ready to move into the resurfacing of those streets. And I'd be happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
What did they do the patches on the sidewalks with? What kind of material? Didn't look like it was
On the
concrete.
sidewalks,
Yeah.
the repairs that I mentioned,
Yeah.
they have a machine that they grind down the edges and any imperfections, any raises that are over the ADA requirement. I think it's more than 1/4 of an inch. Anything large or greater than that, they'll go in with it's a type of a grinder, and they literally mill down the concrete, which gives it more of a smooth section. So it's not actually cutting out and replacing sections. It's cutting down, sanding down those areas that are sticking up that could be trip hazards.
Gotcha.
But then they don't go back and fill with anything?
No,
That's why it just looks like it's a different color, but I guess that's where they
it's
ground
shiny.
it down.
It looks like new concrete once because they've
Yeah.
sanded it down.
Okay.
So yeah.
It looked like it had some kind of shell material, like something you would see.
Yeah,
Beach
it's what it
roads.
looks like.
Yeah.
Over time, it will eventually, weathered, it will look like the rest of it.
Gotcha.
It's just a way to increase the safety on our sidewalks without us having to go in and rip everything out and replace everything at one time.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you coming tonight. Going to water, sewer, gas, and stormwater, Mr. Middlebrooks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The reports for February are attached on your tablets there, and if you got any questions, I'll take those. Couple updates on the water division. We have the meter relocation for the 5th and 6th Street CDBG project. Got those completed. That was part of our contribution to a way of cutting some of the cost on the CDBG project. Sewer department's been evaluating the paving on the streets that the Public Works will be paving this year to make sure that the sewer lines are in good shape. If we need to rehab any of them, we will start rehabbing Olympia Way this month. That was one of the ones that's already been determined that need to be replaced. And as far as gas, Dean Hill and the Mountain View Drive, both of those extensions are completed and have been gassed up. And crews will begin finishing the Alcovey Street project, which was a rehab project we started last year. So that will be completed next before we start the extension on to chicken houses. And then the stormwater, we will be replacing a section of storm drain on Wayne Street from the police station down to Spring Street. That's sometime this month. If you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
Ladies, gentlemen, any questions? Thank you, Rodney. Moving into committees, we go to finance. Larry Bradley?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
we have one item on the agenda, and that's to recommend approval of some changes to the personnel policies and the operational policies of the city. I just make a comment on this, I guess, for the staff people that have worked on this. I think have done a tremendous job, and the members of the committee probably have taken notice that there's quite a lengthy number and significant, I think, in many cases, policy changes and things. I have talked to Logan about, he's prepared to go through each of these and discuss them, and I guess I would ask members of the committee, Lee and Wayne, if we want to spend tonight, because I think it's going to take a little while to go through this, or we need to have a special call meeting. I'm happy either way. I'm happy to spend it tonight. I know we still got some more of the agenda to go, but if you've gone through, I think it I think it's important that Logan at least touch on each of these policies, and go through here, not to just go over the initial parts that says this is why they were done, but actually discuss each one. Some would be quick, obviously. But I'll leave it to you guys on how you want to proceed on that. And Logan, do you have any comments you want to make, or?
Some will be quick, others not so much. This is pretty much the culmination of about 8 months worth of work.
Yeah.
Between me
I mean, it's a
and
comprehensive change
staff,
to
but
the
so
policy manual, that.
I don't want to bog the meeting down. So if the committee wants to reconvene at another time, just for these, I'll be happy to do that.
And I guess the question would be, if we do this as a committee and then just recommend approval to the full council, and the council may not hear that, I'm not sure that other members of the council may want to be involved in these discussions too, so, I don't know what.
Well,
y'all
we can
think.
have individual discussions, as well we should. So if you want to get together and go over them between now and next week, we can all be in contact individually, just not as no quorums and not as a group.
Wait, what do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'd hate to take up, I mean, if the committee, if there are three of us and we're all contacting Logan, it may be better served for his time and in respect of his time, just to have a call, just have a meeting at some point and have him go over these.
A separate meeting
The
from
finance meeting, yes.
tonight. Wayne, you have any thoughts?
I'm not on finance.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nathan's on, excuse me, I'm sorry. Nathan.
I don't know, would it be feasible just to point out the major changes from our previous policies?
Right. So the first 2 pages behind the cover letter there basically state the major changes in bullet point format for each policy. What we've done is created basically a master document that's easily accessible for all the employees and for you all as well. So on the personnel side, I think if I was going to hit a couple of highlights, a lot of these are just very minor process changes, but probably the largest one or biggest change would be internal announcements, so that we can fill from within. Basically, we can fill these jobs a lot quicker if we know that certain skill sets can pretty much only be found within. And then what that does is that when that position is backfilled, we'll open it up to the public to refill the one that was vacated. Or we at least give a 10-day period for that internal posting. If we don't have anybody internally that puts in, then, it's just open to the public. And that also gives a career path for some employees as well. It allows for some of that internal posting so that we can just quickly move along.
If the committee agrees, and it's not necessary this be adopted next week, correct?
That's not necessary, no.
So, if you guys are okay, I'd like to try to schedule a separate meeting. Mr. Garrett is also on the committee, but, to discuss these. I started going through it, and I think I understand the changes, but I think we still have an obligation to agree on the changes, if you will, agree on what the policy says, because that's something we're adopting, and the employees are looking to us for approval of these policies, not just the staff.
Mr. Bradley, Chairman Bradley, if you are inclined to do so, and a motion to table this matter were taken and passed, and then you found time for a meeting between now and your May call, the May work session, then it would essentially go straight to the consent agenda if at that call meeting y'all made a motion to recommend it to the full council. So that would be your easiest procedural path to defer this to a specially set meeting.
I'm sorry, but I couldn't understand what you said, how it would affect the May call meeting.
I'm sorry, I apologize. If you had a motion to table this, and it were properly tabled out of committee, and then in the interim, a specially called meeting of that committee were made, then that item would come up at that call meeting, and and then if a motion were made to recommend it to the full council, then it wouldn't necessarily have to be considered again at your call May, your work session, your May work session.
Okay. So I guess I'm gonna ask the other two members of the committee what your thoughts are on that.
I make a motion that we table it
Okay,
and find a time for the committee to meet.
I'll second that.
all right. We have a motion by Mr. Little, second by Ms. Malcolm. All in favor? Aye. Then that is tabled. And I will follow up on trying to arrange for a time for a call meeting later on.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
And that's all we have.
Airport committee typically would refer to Norman or Chris, and I guess that falls to Logan.
No items scheduled for airport tonight.
Oh, quick and painless.
Yeah.
Public Works,
No items tonight.
Mr. Dickinson, thank you. Utilities, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Mayor. First item is the discussion and approval of the Loganville Water Sales Agreement. And I believe Mr. Hofstetler is going to speak to us about that.
Thank you, Mr. Little.
Thanks, sir.
Kevin's giving out these maps. I think we'll come up one short. Mr. Thompson could
Thank you, sir.
give the map. Y'all have a map over there? Did y'all give the map? Yeah. Give that to David. Let me first report that the wastewater line that we're running from Lyon up to the highway is under design. There is some rough terrain down in there that we're going to have to blow through. I think there's some rock down there, but we made plans for that in the estimate, so hopefully that will come out okay. But we're in the middle of the design of that. Rodney and Logan have approached me for the past, I think it's been almost 2 years, about running a water line between the city of Monroe and the city of Loganville to provide water to the city of Loganville. Now, understand that there will not be any connections in between the two. This will just be a supply line only, because in the service delivery, that's not our service delivery, that's the county's. However, we can run the line down, if you can see, down the highway, I think it's 78, and that we will get a DOT permit for that, and we'll be able to do that. I do think, after looking at it, and of course Logan ran the numbers, and Rodney looked at the capacity of the water plant, it will not be a problem or put a strain on any part of the system of the city of Monroe. It's going to be approximately 37,000 linear feet of either 12 or 14-inch water line, depending on how Loganville wants that water delivered. Also, in the design, we will start with an initial rate of 1 million gallons a day. All the components at this point in time will be designed to deliver 2 million gallons a day, because I do believe that in the agreement that will be the ultimate number that the city of Loganville will want, and so we might as well, as we're building this, we might as well make it capable of delivering that number right now. That number, 2 million gallons a day, can be provided by the water system. We may have to put in that 30-inch raw water main at that point in time, but that's a discussion for another day. When deciding when we're going to put the water line, Rodney and I will, or our company will decide which side of the road to put it on, but I think it'll be on the far side. We also are going to tie into the city of Loganville where they want it. We had to just basically decide ourselves where we would put it. If you decide to move with this project, which I think you are, obviously when we design it, we will go in and make fire flow tests, and we'll make pressure tests, and we'll do all the things that engineers do to make it safe. Where we start is down basically at the intake of the Alcovey River, and it will be a pressure at that just existing pressure of between 90 and 100 PSI, we'll of course pump that up to approximately 120 to 140 PSI to produce the amount of water that we want that's going to be delivered to Loganville. That will not be the pressure at Loganville, okay? Just to make sure everybody understands that, because that's going to be 200 to 250 feet higher, so you have to have that pressure at that pump station to deliver approximately 60 PSI at the city of Loganville, or whatever pressure they want, okay? Also, on sizing the pumps, how we will have to decide or meet with the city of Loganville to determine how they want this water. In other words, they want 1 million gallons a day. Well, that's 700 gallons a minute, but that's 24/7. You know, they may not want it at that. They may want it, well, we want it all in an 8-hour span. Therefore, the pumps will be bigger, pipes will be bigger, but they may want a constant flow. Okay, they don't want a surge in their system. They want a constant flow. We can accommodate any way the city of Loganville wants it. That will not really be a problem for us one way or the other, because of the elevated tanks and the size lines that we have that we're going to tie into. As I mentioned, we will have to get a DOT permit, GDOT. It is a highway. There are plenty of establishments on that highway, so we'll have a lot of bores. We'll have to deal with a lot of driveways, a lot of different things. We have, of course, anticipated that in our cost estimate, which was done started about 2 years ago. So it could be a increase in price because the economy's just gotten better. Everything that we estimated 2 years ago, Kelvin, been 20 to 25% more. We do have contingencies in there that will absorb some of that. But when we bid it out, we'll know how much it obviously costs at that point in time. Logan warned me, Carl, do not be verbose. Tell the facts and be quiet. And so I think I've given you the basic facts of what we're doing. And so
Thank you, Logan.
I would never say that.
Because as y'all know that have known me for a while, that consulting engineers can talk for just as long as you want us to. So I'm going to hush right now and ask if there's any questions.
Is the cost of $23 and $4 million still exactly what you think it'll be?
And our share is half. And our share is
Share's
half of that.
Our share is half that, correct?
That's right. The contract before you here basically outlines the rates that we will be selling to Loganville. So what we're asking tonight is your approval of the water sales agreement to Loganville, contingent upon the final legal counsel reviews and amendments as we pass that back and forth between Loganville's legal counsel as well. But all in all, the contract is, I would say, 99% there. So we're just trying to get final approvals here of this agreement. Really with the cost estimated between that 3 and 4 million, which is in this contract, that will split 50-50 along with those rates I mentioned a moment ago, which are tiered. And I believe our full payback on this water line will be somewhere around the 4-year mark. And this is 10-year contract with 10-year renewables.
Well, it's been a long time in discussion, and it, particularly since, 5-7 years ago, Walton County quit buying water from us. We have the capacity.
Absolutely.
And it's there. It's an opportunity to sell it, to help the city of Logan and to help the city of Monroe.
Absolutely.
And so I would entertain a motion to approve the, you said you just want to approve the sales.
The water sales agreement as presented, pending final legal counsel reviews and amendments.
All right.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Thank you. We'll recommend that to full council. Thank you, Carl.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
It doesn't offend anybody. I'm not gonna say. Interesting, as I know it will be.
Yeah, man, thank you, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
Girls, always good to see you.
Good to see you, Carl.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
The next item then is purchase of vehicles, water treatment, and wastewater treatment facilities. Mr. Middlebrook.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Asking your permission to purchase two standard F-150s base models at a price. Low bid was $20,500, which was $1,000 over the budget for the two. We're replacing two older vehicles, one at each plant, water plant, sewer plant. Both of those vehicles were hand-me-downs from previous replacements we done several years back. One truck has 170,000 miles. Actually, it's more than that. The odometer, the last reading we had was 170,000. So I know it's got more than that. The other one's 132,000. Like I said, both are hand-me-downs and wore out. So this actually be, I think, the first new truck that's ever been purchased for the plants. Like I said, it's a base model. No extras. Just a V6 as far as the engine goes. Kept it as basic as we could. If you got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
Of course, this is coming out of CIP.
Yes, sir. This is one of the CIP items we had. Yes.
You're not absorbing it in the current budget.
Correct.
And finances, Logan has looked at this.
Yes, sir. Talked about it in depth for quite a while. So, and this is one of those vehicles, that we'll use for many, many years. It'll stick around for a while.
This ought to be a 10 or 15 year vehicle for the plants. We've had the hand-me-downs more than 5, and so we get all we can get out of it.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion to approve the purchase of the two vehicles?
I'll make the motion to approve the two trucks for the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant at the low bid of $20,500 each.
Motion by Mr. Adcock. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Rodney. We'll recommend that to full council.
Thank you.
Now, the next one's yours too, then.
It is. This is asking your permission again to purchase a new mini excavator for the stormwater department. If you remember last year, I think we bought one for I believe last year's was the sewer department. And we talked about, we still have two on rent monthly. Actually, $2,095.53 a month per tractor. Both of these units have been on rent for more than a year. So we'll be actually able to take one of these off of the rental program and replace it with one for the stormwater division. The low bid was Perimeter Takahauchi, come in at $63,600, which was $11,400 below what we had budgeted for a unit this size. If there's any questions,
What's the maintenance like on these units?
They may be able to tell you more than I can on that part as far as fleet goes.
Actually, on top of it, there's some very minimal maintenance required, other than just your normal PMs on your normal
oil changes, you might call it.
The rental units, do we have to do any maintenance on the rental units?
No, they do it.
They do that. So we're paying like $2,000 a month, you said, on the rental unit
Per tractor.
per tractor. So the cost of buying one of these is roughly 30 months worth of rental. So how long should this last us?
You may be able to speak more than I can. We've got, the first one we bought was water department. I'd say it was 06, and it's still like new. It's
Okay.
no major issues that I know of, just other than oil changes and
So
stuff like that. So
All divisions are union.
So it's like a cutoff of, say, 3 years worth of rental, but you expect it to last much longer than that, so that's why you justify the cost of purchase over rental.
correct.
You know how many of these we have in all divisions?
I have 3. Water, sewer, and gas each has their own. This is the last one I've got to buy as far as my department goes. I think Brian's got one. I'm not sure about Public Works. I think they've got 1 or 2.
We have 2, but one.
Are there any other questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion that we purchase the mini excavator at a cost of $63,600.
Motion by Mr. Larry Bradley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We will recommend that to full council. Thank you, Rodney. IT van, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, come on down to this one, Mr. Bailey. Took a vacation this week. This is a van to replace a 2002 Mercury Mountaineer. Best of my knowledge, the Mercury Mountaineer was bought from state surplus several years ago. It has a little over 230,000 miles. That's what Conwell told me earlier. This is what Steve Conwell uses to transport printers, computers, and other assorted devices between departments. Steve has to maintain servers. Basically, there's a separate system at the police department, and then there are isolated, many spread out systems at Public Works, the fire department, disaster recovery up at our utilities warehouse. So this is his transportation, and the old Mountaineer is about done. I took a look at it today, and I don't know how it's made it this long. I'll take any questions you may have. He did budget $25,000, and the low bid came in at $24,500, so he's $500 under budget.
Are they convinced this is the best vehicle for IT?
That is what they told me. They carry smaller stuff. The Mountaineer works. It could be a little bigger. It could have a little more storage, and this has a fold-down rear seat, from what I understand. So it gives them a little more room to carry stuff than the Mountaineer has itself.
Any questions? Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion to recommend the full council purchase of this van for the IT department.
Motion by Mr. Adcock. Is there a
$24,500.
second?
I'll second it.
Motion second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We'll recommend that to full council. Now you want one too.
I know a little bit more about this one.
Okay.
This is the one we discussed at the CIP meeting that will become our customer service van. Basically, Tommy Whitehead is our meter specialist. He does all meter testing, commercial meter testing at this point. He also does energy audits. That's commercial and residential energy audits. He's riding around in a 2001 Dodge pickup truck with 140-something thousand miles on it. And Nathan, you'll probably remember this one. This was the one that Mr. Morrow bought when he was general manager back in the early 2000s. So it's been around. It's had a pretty rough life. It did finally give up the ghost last week. The week before last, he poured a gallon of oil in it, and it all came out the tailpipe. And it sounds like two squirrels are hitting the side of the cylinders with a hammer, so Public Works has told me it's done. So what we looked around and we spec'd out the cargo vans, the Ford cargo vans and the Dodge cargo vans and even the Mercedes cargo vans, which are all similarly priced, and Dodge came in at a much better price than all of them. This van will carry, again, I said all our meter testing equipment. It will carry, if y'all so approve in the next month or two, our fault locating equipment. We have these little boxes. If you lose part power on your home, we can hook that box up to your meter base, and it will get your power back up during the night, so we can come back during the daytime during normal business hours and do that. That's why it's a 2500. That's why it's a little different than the IT department. It's going to be carrying a lot more gear, ladders, all that kind of thing. We did budget $27,000 for this. We came in, and Chris assures me, he has an email from Enterprise, that this is a purchase, not a lease. It looks like in their quote they did a lease, but he had an email from them stating this is a purchase. This will be a 20-year van, and it'll just be going site to site to site to site. As long as we maintain it well, it'll be that 18-year vehicle. And I'll take any questions you may have.
It's a little off subject, but Brian and I have been talking about creating this master account.
Major accounts.
Major accounts, I guess you can call it different names for it. Where we basically take care of our big commercial industrial customers, and having this tool in our toolkit will help make sure that we have routine maintenance and visits with these folks so that we can continue to grow our industry here in Monroe.
Yeah, to expand on that, with Leggett and Platt and the hospital, they really appreciate, we check those meters twice a year. Now, my initial reason for doing that is make sure they're accurate and make sure we're reading all the energy. But it also proves to them that we're trying to accurately bill them. And on the residential side, being able to go to that home with this test equipment in this van and show up and prove to a person that their meter is accurate is huge. It's big to the customer and big to us. One thing I didn't mention during my report, in February, the city as a whole used 147% more energy than it was normally budgeted for a February through MEAC. So we had several people questioning their meters. Right now we have a process it takes about a 4-day process to prove that. We get the van and we get the test equipment that's up and coming. You can do that in 5 minutes. Test that meter and hand them a printout of what their meter's doing.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
I move that we recommend to the full council the purchase of the 2018 Dodge Ram ProMaster from Enterprise at a cost of $24,497.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Bradley. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Adcock. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Motion carries. We recommend that to council.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you, Mayor.
Thompson. Thank you, Mr. Little. Moving to public safety. Wayne Adcock.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one item on the agenda this evening. It's out-of-state travel for the fire department. Chief Glass.
Thank you, Chairman Adcock. What I come and ask you for support in tonight is out-of-state training for our Lieutenant Toe, who is our training officer. He's also a volunteer with Oconee, which is kind of absorbing some of the cost. He'll actually travel with some of those guys to Indiana to go to this training. Our cost is going to be less than $500, not counting his salary. This training event is trainers from all over the nation and some from across the country. But I think the greatest thing that he'll get out of it is exposure to the latest and greatest in training tactics and how they train folks. And I think probably the best $500 we spent in fire as far as the effect that it can have on us in the future as far as our training program. So I ask you to support that.
Thank you, Chief. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion by Ms. Malcolm, second.
Second.
By Ross Bradley. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We recommend that to full council.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
support.
Chief. That's all we have, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Adcock. Planning and Code, Ms. Malcolm. Have we talked any further about, what we had tabled last month with the R1A?
R1A.
Moratorium, and
Right.
I don't think we've done anything else.
We haven't
other
done
than-
anything further, other than we've contracted with Smith Consulting, and they're in the process of basically helping us rewrite the proper zoning for R1A on the periphery, and then looking to bring
A new.
a new category within our in-town, downtown area.
And I knew we had talked
Yeah.
about it, I just remember exactly where we had left it, so thank you.
All right, hopefully we'll revisit sometime this summer.
Thank you.
John, I'm gonna have to slip out.
Yes, ma'am. Economic Development, Ross Bradley.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we got one item tonight. It's discussion of the Community Improvement Tax Incentive. Ms. Sadie Crosby's going to help us through that.
And this is just for discussion, to answer questions and present to council kind of the work and the research that the Monroe Housing Team, as a part of GIC, has kind of pulled together. It's not a recommendation either way. It's just kind of showing what a potential timeline, if you wanted to consider and doing something like this. And the Community Improvement Tax Incentive is the language that other communities have attached to the blight tax. And just to clarify, a blight tax is for vacant, dilapidated structures. It's not a tool used for any residential or commercial structures that are occupied. It's not a tool to displace anyone. It is only for vacant, dilapidated structures within a city. Some communities will adopt it and use it only for commercial vacant structures. If you can imagine some of the larger industrial sites or even large big box retail in some communities that just sit vacant and they can't seem to get it taken care of or moved. This is a tool to help that property change, either to get it remediated and taken care of or torn down or activity from owners. So that's one way that's used for commercial properties. With residential properties, it's a way to add a multiplier to the property tax. And again, vacant residential properties, and typically it's 7 times the property tax. That would be just the city tax unless there's partnership with the county. And then it's basically deemed dilapidated based on our property ordinance that we already have in place. If it meets the criteria of blighted, then it would be considered blighted. The tax is attached to it. It can be appealed. And kind of what you have before you is this FAQ page. This is from Savannah. So when they rolled this out in their city, they had frequently asked questions they posted on their website, and then they also had a feedback form that the community could click and ask their own questions. And I thought this was really well done as far as engaging the public, making sure everyone understood what it was, had ample opportunity to give feedback and ask their questions. And even in this proposed timeline, you can see that's a 4-month process, and this is one to maximize public engagement. So it involves obviously the online forum where you can have feedback form and post things, but also public meetings and discussion back and forth to give us plenty of time. If we wanted to do this, not that council would have to do it where you engaged the public this much on it, but if you wanted to, just to really make sure people understood it. And this would just be another tool in the toolbox to go along with the efforts of code enforcement and the things we're trying to do right now to take care of properties in the city and increase, like what Councilman Larry Bradley pointed out, just the property values and trying to make sure that it's the best that it can be. Some of the things that are highlighted in these frequently asked questions are the kind of the elements that would be up to your discretion and however you wanted to create this kind of tool if you wanted to for our community. For example, the taxation, the multiplying it by 7, that's up to your discretion. 7 is what has been modeled in most cities, and it's what's recommended in the GMA model ordinance. All those links should work on that PDF, that where you can click on those model ordinances and the other tools. Also, you can also allocate where that additional funding, that additional tax money, that it would go back into housing or into community improvement. You can earmark that, and which is what Savannah did in Savannah's example, used only for community improvement purposes. And the other piece to it, which is why it's called a community improvement tax incentive, is that if you take care of the blighted condition by either renovating the structure or demolishing it, you lock in that reduced tax rate for a period of time. Does that make sense? So it's a reward for taking care of a blighted property for the owner. So in Savannah, their example was that they would cut in half the normal millage rate for up to 4 years. So you're getting a reduced tax rate for 4 years because you took care of your blighted property, if that makes sense. So it's a reward, it's a penalty that comes with a reward if you take care of it. And I also included on there questions that the community in Savannah asked. So I felt like they were good, and it helps us understand concerns that citizens may have in response to a tool like this. The only one that I didn't put on here was one they had about vacation rental, because that doesn't really apply to us. We don't have a vacation rental issue yet. On the additional resources that are on that timeline, tools that already exist that we have in place, the first line on there, single-family housing repair loans and grants through USDA, our community is already eligible for those, and those are available for homeowners because we are in a designated rural area through USDA. Those are existing tools that are already available to citizens in Monroe that own their homes to repair their homes. There are some income restrictions, and with many of the tools that the state has that we could set up are going to have an affordability component to it. So it's going to have an income restriction where if you make a certain amount, you wouldn't be eligible for the same grants or the same. Just like the CHIP grant that we applied for, there is an income restriction to that, if that makes sense. But these are just some other suggestions that other cities have done to go along with this. One would be CHIP grants for new construction. CDBG also has housing components that you can layer with infrastructure grants. We've never done that. That's an option. And then in Savannah, you'll see in their questions, somebody asked, well, what about rental properties? And they actually have a derelict rental property ordinance. So that's another tool. It basically just says if you're a repeat offender as a landlord, you have shortened timelines and higher fees. And then the other tool on here that's mentioned is a land bank authority. Communities set these up so that when you have property that is tax delinquent or air properties that they just don't want to deal with it anymore, they can give that property to a land bank, and then the city can sell that or assimilate that land and do other projects with it. Okay, that's a lot of information, questions, clarifications, and really this is just to start the conversation, to give you tools, kind of see what information has been put together, and there are lots of mixed opinions on it, but I wanted to clarify, especially as we keep talking about it and more citizens are asking about this kind of tool, that it's for vacant, dilapidated properties and can be applied to both commercial and residential, one or the other. It's up to the city's discretion of how they would want to do it, obviously.
The derelict rental property ordinance, if that's something we were to choose to move forward with, might answer this question, but similar to code, is there any opportunity or option as commercial or residential tenants move out of a space?
What do you mean?
Like a lease is up and they choose to go somewhere else, and so that place is vacant. Would something like this apply?
Right, so derelict rental does have to also be vacant, or are those two
No,
separate?
that's different. No, that's a completely separate ordinance, and I just mentioned that because some people think that a blight tax or a community improvement tax incentive is going to help with blighted properties, period. It doesn't. It doesn't help with properties that may be substandard that are owned or occupied or rental. So when they had that frequently asked question in Savannah, I think the question was, something about landlords being held accountable for blight they cause, and then they responded, they are held accountable under the derelict rental property ordinance. But I highlighted it because we don't have that tool. We have code enforcement, we have tools, but we don't have that specific ordinance. And I really couldn't even speak to that in full detail because that's kind of, that would be Patrick and Code Department. Right. Just wanted to point that out because it's listed in these Savannah's toolbox and we don't have it.
Can we find a way to add that as piggybacking on to the 700%?
It's a different tool because
I mean, I understand it's a different tool, but
Yeah.
Would that be something that we could try to move forward with both at the same time?
We can do both at the
If you-
same time,
if
or
it's
we can
deemed
baby
necessary.
step into it with this one, with the vacant properties first, which I don't think we'll have a problem filling out, some of those cards.
No, that's gonna be on the list.
That question of the vacant property, does it have to be vacant for any period of time, or is it, if it's, for example, if it's rental property and a person moves out today and he's trying to rent it, but it's vacant tomorrow, so could we?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would imagine that it's articulated in the ordinance.
It says 2 months.
2 months.
But again, that probably could be adjusted based on council's discretion.
So as of right now with the code department, if the utilities change ownership, so to speak, the code department has the right to go in and check to make sure the house is suitable for a new resident, correct?
We used to do that, but we don't any longer. We're going to get additional help in enforcement and try and institute something along those lines.
Right.
But at this time, no, we don't go in unless the tenant calls and complains about something, then we can go in and deem it unfit and post it at a time and address it that way.
Gotcha.
And I think as Sadie said earlier, it's gonna help if we can get the county on board. Even if they just allowed us to do this within the confines of Monroe, that would help us tremendously to actually put a little punch behind it.
Does anybody have any idea of how many properties that would be affected by this today? How many vacant properties that would fit the blighted category?
I don't
Any
have a
rough
number on,
idea?
I don't have a number on that. I would say at least 100.
Oh, would it be that many?
I would think so.
What do you think the breakdown is, commercial versus residential on that?
I think you would probably see more residential.
Why
But I
not?
know, but I
Think
can,
of one commercial.
I can think of a handful of
There's a huge
small commercial.
commercial, I'm thinking, well, 2 of them actually,
Right.
that we need to do something
There's-
about.
There's a handful for sure.
And my thoughts on this thing, it's sort of like the old proverb about eating an elephant. You need to do it a little bite at a time. And I think if we were gonna do this, the way to do it would be to start with the properties that are defined as vacant, that we clearly know are vacant, have been so for a long period of time. Because we've got such a problem, we don't want to get overwhelmed with trying to do too much, too fast. And we need to do a good job of educating our citizens about what it is we're doing. But it's, I think it's effective. Do you have any input about, notice you listed some cities that have done it, which Savannah, Albany, College Park, Griffin, Swainsboro. Have they
Albany's
been
probably used it
successful?
the most extensively, but it's, again, it was one of the tools as they kind of did a major overhaul focused on housing, and they're much bigger than we are. And they've done a very aggressive demolition plan too. So that's an example of Albany. Griffin has used it, but again, there's a number of communities have passed this, and like Savannah's a great example. They passed it in 2017, and they're just now figuring out how they're going to use it. So it's still probably early, and I think it really depends on the community of how effective it's been. There was a presentation. They actually did research on communities that have passed it, and they did a presentation on how effective it has been, and it's across the board as far as effectiveness. Some communities that they contacted didn't even know they had it. So it all comes, again, we have really great ordinances. It's kind of what y'all choose to do with it, and how far you're going, and what we have the capacity to do with it. But again, this would just be another tool in the toolbox as we're getting all the efforts going to improve properties in the city.
So is it, got the same question maybe from Patrick or Logan, anybody is. Is it a bigger issue with vacant properties today than it is with the derelict rental property, I guess? Which one's the most significant in the community?
Probably your rental properties. But what would be easier to start out with, like Mr. Dickinson was saying, is probably the vacant properties. That's what I would want to baby step this into.
Plus, I think that would probably be better to stomach by the property owners, because they know they have dilapidated units. They're not. I can think of 10 right off the top of my head. They won't let people live in them because they're in such bad conditions. They just haven't torn them down and haven't fixed them up. So that's a way to get them moving.
Motivation.
Questions?
We'll be happy to continue to advance a more concrete timeline for this implementation over the next few months. And then hopefully we'll have something in place for next year, so that by the time tax assessments go out for 2019, this program will be in place.
Thank you, Sadie. Thank you, Ross. Items for discussion, upcoming public hearings. I'm gonna refer to Logan.
Yeah, just a brief note on the upcoming public hearings. We have a rezone for 603 and 606 Alcovey Street. And then we will also be having a rezone for 302 North Madison Street. And that'll be at the council meeting next week. We also have the public hearing for the zoning ordinance code text amendment number 5. But all of these items will be hitting down below in our items of discussion. So from there, we can move on to the presentation.
Thank you. Next week, we'll have a presentation. We have a proclamation for Child Abuse Prevention Week. Lauren Gregory is going to join us. She's with a Child's Voice Advocacy Center. They've been working with the partnership, Family Partnership of Walton County. Just a couple of things. The CDC estimates that 1 in 4 children experience maltreatment in their lifetimes. That abuse. So this is a way for us to help Lauren advocate for those kids. So she will be here next week, and I really do appreciate the work that she's done. And I'm going to go back to Logan with Historic Preservation Commission appointment.
Yeah, this is just a reappointment of Miss Susan Brown, continuing to serve on the HPC. If there's any discussion, I'll be happy to do that. Otherwise, this will be before you next week.
Okay. Not really sure why we're saying this twice, but rezone of 603 and 606. Mr. Kelly?
Just to give you a little more detail on what will be coming up, this is just an item of discussion.
That's right. I was just offering a brief synopsis of each one if you'd like. Obviously, you've got the recommendation pages there. The first one is the rezone for 603 and 606 Alcovey Street. We met with planning and zoning. It got tabled, then we met again last month, and they recommended for approval with some conditions as listed. Originally, it was recommended to deny because they were seeking, or they appeared to be seeking, the minimum R1A standards. So now they've got some conditions listed below, and they can be added to or amended by you to your satisfaction. But we have recommended for approval for that small development there. If you've got any questions on that, I'll be happy to answer them.
I'm sorry, my PDF document doesn't have those attachments.
Doesn't have.
Under the public hearings part, we just didn't attach it twice. Because
you're on the full PDF. It's
Yeah.
gonna be at the end. For some reason, it's throwing them at the end. It's gonna be after this right
It's not
here.
up here.
Very end.
Yeah, where it's listed the first time on the agenda is where the active HTML link is that you can utilize. If you're using the PDF, like she said, it'll be at the end.
Okay.
And of course, next week, the applicant will be here to answer any questions or contend with any other amendments or requirements that you might want to add or delete.
So both of these, staff and planning and zoning both recommend approval.
That's correct. With the recommended conditions and whatever additions or deletions you might like to make yourself as the council.
You may have already said, but it's R1A rezone, but this was submitted before the moratorium was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, just, yeah, it was put in, kind of squeaked under the wire before we instituted the moratorium for reconsideration.
Looking at just under 4 acres, how many houses?
They're looking at 14 lots on the submitted plan. I doubt they would be able to get that total yield based on the fact that they're going to need to use a little bit more space for soil erosion control measures and stormwater management, things like that. There's no amenities in there of any description, so if you wanted to require those, then that would take up some space as well. What they're looking to do, they kind of went with a broad range of what we're trying to do. They went from retreat at Mill Creek all the way to the Legends as their brackets, and that's why one of the recommendations was to narrow that down to the aesthetic that they're actually looking for. And so what these requirements do, they aim more at the aesthetic of retreat at Mill Creek rather than the Legends, which is 4 sides brick. What they're looking for is brick or stone on the front and hardy plank siding on the remainder.
Wayne, have you had a chance to look at this? I know we're so close to you.
Yeah, I just looked it over, and I particularly don't like the fact that the guy squeaked it in with the moratorium, with an R1A out there.
I think it came in before the moratorium.
Yeah, they had applied before we had instituted it.
I'm sorry, the way you worded it, I thought you meant how he snuck it in after it was already put in place.
I didn't say it that way. I didn't intend to say it that way anyway.
But even though they had put in the application, we had not met on it for the moratorium.
We had not, but it went to planning and zoning. So
Prior to the moratorium.
well, it was in the works to go to planning and zoning then. So, by the way the moratorium was written, and I believe by the legal construct of it, we had to honor that submission.
Correct.
Yeah, because their application predated the consideration of the moratorium.
That's correct. Moratorium, I don't have the exact date. It would have been the February council meeting, so it would have been the second Tuesday of February. So I believe that would have been February 13th. Ms. Debbie can probably confirm that. But that was the date the moratorium was effective upon your consideration and passage. Any applications received prior to that date would not be effective.
So that was a little bit
And
more.
and that is to keep you guys in legal compliance on the moratorium.
So-
Because then you have a shaky issue.
In your opinion and discussion, all right, does this section fall into the betterment of the city?
Well, that's kind of subjective, but it meets the same sort of criteria of the two that were approved recently before it. It's very similar, just the scope is much smaller, and the amenities aren't included, basically because I guess it's a smaller development.
Well, one of the things that always concerns me about these, I was looking here, and of course it has this thing saying after construction, there will be 14 houses valued at $275,000 to $300,000. Yeah, I'm gonna bring this up next week when the developer is here to talk about it. The thing that keeps happening is people keep telling us, oh, these are gonna be $300,000 houses, and then all of a sudden somehow between that statement and what they put on the ground, what they put on the ground doesn't come near that. That's what the problem is, and that item 3, I think it is, needs some real clarification about what it is this developer and others are gonna be required to do in terms of, I think it's termed aesthetics. Yeah. Number 3, specify aesthetics and final finish due to the broad disparity between Legends and the retreat at Mill Creek. So, as a practical matter, I think the question is, how do we do that? What is our practical way to assure that when a developer says, I'm gonna build a house that's a $300,000 house, that that's what he or she builds, rather than a $150,000 house that is attractive to institutional purchasers, which frankly is what I think we don't want. How do we do that?
Good point. You don't have to approve the rezone. I mean, you could say no.
If he was actually doing what he says he's gonna do, $275,000 to $300,000, that's a quality development in my book,
Right.
and a good thing. But folks keep bringing us these things and saying that, and then what they actually put on the ground is not what they promised. And that's what we've got to get a handle on, I think. Somehow, some way, we've got to hold folks' feet to the fire, so. And
Well-
again, those are questions I understand, they're more
Right.
appropriate for him than they are for you.
And we are trying to address that through the consultant that we're dealing with for the infill development and the rewrite, so that we can nail those down. Right now, we don't have that. That's what the conditions are designed to do. 1,700 square foot house at $100 a square foot, which is a very minimal finish, is $170,000.
True.
So if you upgrade it at all, you're over 200. So, I mean, they'd be approaching it, but it'd be up to them to do the fit and finish to get all the way there. And then, of course, it's based on comparables and all that sort of stuff. But this, I'm not arguing for or against it, I'm just presenting it. The applicant would have to justify it to you and satisfy your concerns before you approve it or deny it. I think if you put enough conditions on it, you'll get there, and if not, you'll wind up with exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right. That'll be interesting next week.
Yes, sir.
And move along to North Madison
No problem.
302.
So much for the brief synopsis. I'll try and do better on this one. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is the Shauna and Clayton Matthias that's just interested in rezoning their residential property to residential zoning classification from neighborhood commercial. I believe they spoke, maybe they didn't, that was planning and zoning, but they're just trying to get a more conventional loan, and the people that they're approaching don't want to refinance it for their purposes at a reasonable rate with the B1 zoning, since they're going to use it for residential purposes anyhow, and have done an outstanding job actually restoring the property. We recommend for approval on that one.
And I looked over this, and I can't tell where the house is.
It's right next to the market store at the corner of Bold Springs and North Madison Avenue, across from the old school.
Remodeled and
That's correct.
was on TV and everything?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep, celebrity remodel. So anyways, that's that application. I mean, I don't know anybody that's expressed any heartburn with that one. And again, their stated goal is just to refinance at a better rate through a more conventional loan source.
And it really does look, what they're trying to do in the area is really bring it up. They're trying to find a way to get some of the properties on Turner Street, turn those around and rehab those too. So anything that we can do on our side with extra police presence, chief, down in that area, and stay on them with code enforcement too. You know, we just want to make this city better.
Right. Well, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, 327 Bold Springs that the applicant for the previous rezone owned got crushed by a tree during Irma, so it got demolished. And then around the corner, we've got a house scheduled to start being torn down tomorrow on Turner Street. So working on that. So that area is making strides. There's not a tremendous amount of houses in that area, but the ones that remain, we want them to be nice.
Are there any questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
All right, and then
Appreciate
the
you
last
being
one
here.
is the text amendment, which is text amendment number 5 of the of the zoning ordinance, was part of text amendment number 4, which you'll get the second reading of next meeting. This will be the first reading of this one that addresses the cats and dogs and the quantities. We separated it out for further consideration and input. Basically, it has come back to you in the same form that it was extracted from the other amendment for any input at this point, since we have had none to this point. And again, this was part of our animal control ordinance, which we did away with to line up with the county. And therefore, that's why we're wanting to put it in the zoning ordinance in order to cover this and have some sort of constraint not from an animal control perspective per se, but from a perspective of health, safety, sanitation, welfare, those kind of things. So kind of an animal overcrowding situation if it ever arises.
So, Amendment 5. Are we coming back to have anything to do with Amendment 4 other than just second reading next week?
That's right.
Are there any questions on Amendment 5? Talk about it next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Next, resolution for MGAG voting delegates and ECG voting delegates. Yeah.
I'll just run through this real quickly. We have a resolution here. Be it resolved by the mayor and city council of the city of Monroe that John S. Howard is hereby appointed to serve as the city's voting delegate on the Municipal Gas Authority of Georgia's election committee, with authority to cast all votes to which the city is entitled. Rodney Middlebrooks is appointed as alternate voting delegate. That is for MGAG. And then ECG will be a duplicate of this, with Wayne Adcock being appointed as alternate voting delegate for ECG.
Thank you, Logan.
Yep. Then we have 2 for MEAG. One is a voting delegate resolution. I'll just read it real quickly. Be it resolved by the mayor and city council of the city of Monroe that John S. Howard is hereby appointed to serve as this city's voting delegate on the Municipal Electric Authority of Georgia's election committee, with authority to cast all votes to which the city is entitled. Wayne Adcock is appointed as alternate voting delegate. And then we have a resolution which outlines who will be the trust beneficiaries for MEAG, the Municipal Competitive Trust Beneficiaries, and who are the authorized signers. That would be John S. Howard, L. Wayne Adcock, Logan Probst, and Beth Thompson. Takes 2 signatures to execute any of those documents, and this is just an update on the MEAG MCT signing documents, the authorization form.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Probst. Resolution 2017 budget amendment. Beth.
Make it short and week, 'cause I know everybody's ready to get out of here. But this is just the end of the year budget amendments that happen typically every year to keep us in compliance with the state of Georgia and the city of Monroe policies. All it is just a matter of some things that were maybe slightly over budget. However, as you'll see in the budget agenda item, that's always not in a negative way. We just had to reappropriate some things to make it all in budget and to get us ready to do our end of the year financial statements and the CAFR.
Is there any one of these?
Do I have to read the resolution?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
But is there anyone in particular that needs to, that would concern you, that should concern us, that are there any?
No, they're all pretty much self-explanatory and were kind of expected, because they were, some of them were kind of proceeds from other areas that kind of offset. So.
I think the big thing that you may notice is, the almost $1.5 million on Walton Plaza. That's 2/3 of the way down the page. The way we had to book that is capital buildings, so it shows 1.494 million there, but that's not a true overstatement of our expenditures. That is because we have done a long-term purchase as a 20-year deal, so it's offset by note proceeds. So it's not like we went over budget by $1.5 million there. It was just a book maneuver.
No, and just some of them were like over budget. Like Logan pointed out, that big one and a couple other big ones were offset by proceeds of, that one was note proceeds and other were capital leases and things like that. So.
Great, thank you, Ms. Thompson.
So has the 2018 budget been adjusted to reflect any of these changes that are permanent, that are expected to recur?
We have been working on that. We haven't brought those amendments before you because most of them are very minor. It falls under our policies that we just handle within our department purview. But yes, we have been discussing monthly budget amendments to make sure that we stay on track and that we don't fall quite as much out of line by the end of the year.
Some of these are, some of them pretty significant numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, are you prepared or be prepared next week, or tonight or whatever, to talk about those individually on maybe what happened during the budget preparation last year, that the budget assumptions we made that maybe didn't come true or whatever that made these wide variances?
Yeah, we can talk about them tonight. Like I said, like for instance, and I'll point out, I have to put on my reading glasses. The CHIP grant is a big one, but that was offset by the CHIP grant from the state. Those expenses were offset by that. The other big one item was, let's see, let me get down. Police vehicles, that was offset by the capital lease proceeds from those lease items, and then also fire was the same way because the offset of the capital lease proceeds. And then like Logan pointed out, for the Walton Plaza building was another large item. And then the other large item was the attorney fees, and those were just indicative of having to have those resources that we had to have more often throughout the year that were not planned for, I should say.
But that's a big one.
That is, yeah.
And it means during the budget process, we just made inadequate assumptions of what the need was going to be.
Well, it was in line of what we had used in prior years. It was just needing those resources more in 2017 than what was anticipated.
Yeah, a lot of these are not really necessarily functions of under budgeting or overspending. Perhaps legal is to some extent, but then again, we were also blindsided with a lot of unanticipated litigation throughout the year as well, and some other various projects that we'd undertaken. So that one may be in a category off to itself. Hotel motel, that's just an inflow outflow. Being over budget there is a good thing because that means we are just transferring more money to CVB.
The airport was another one I thought.
The airport is another one, so it's over budget, but yet that's a function of selling more fuel. That's a function of getting some state grants and federal grants to help offset some of these costs as well. So when we go into the budget process, we hope for the best, but then a lot of times some of these overages are more than made up for by what we receive on the revenue front. And what we're trying to do here is just shore things up at the department level, which we need to have done before we're able to get that final CAFR from our auditors.
When you're removing stuff from accounts called capital equipment, are those operating budget capital equipment lines?
Yes, sir. This is all in the OpEx budgets.
I just wasn't aware that we were putting a whole lot of equipment into the operating budget.
We do have some in there, but not huge sums.
Do we have any questions? Any more comments from Ms. Thompson? Be prepared to answer some more questions next week. We're going to go into this again, but I appreciate you putting this together for us, Beth. Thank you. I need a motion. Well, before I take a motion, does anybody have anything else we need to address that we've not gone over tonight? I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
I heard a so moved.
Second.
From Ross and a second from Nathan. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.